Gene asked me to talk a little about the series I did on other cities and best practices in other cities. So I thought I'd talk a little about that and maybe a bit about the mayor's race. The mayor's race, two mayor's races, the one that sort of began this column, and then the one we've just been through. And I'll keep it sort of short, sort of cut my time in half, so 50% can be a conversation, a dialogue, and I'm not just sort of talking at you. This column that I do started with the last mayor's race. It was John Block's idea that we cover that race in detail and in depth. And so the beginning of the column I write was only on the last mayor's race, and that's all I wrote about until that race was over. And then we kind of reinvented the column to make it more, maybe 25% about politics and more about the community and unsung heroes in the community, issues of the community, but not sort of narrowly politics. And then we had the last mayor's race due to the death of Mayor Collins, so I was sort of back to square one, covering that race fairly intensely. And one of the things we thought would be smart to do once we got into that race was to try to frame the race, to try to talk about what other cities do that kind of makes sense. Best practices, for lack of it, that's the term of art. And I sort of discovered that best practices are sort of mythology. But I discovered some other things when I went to these other cities. So I'll just tell you kind of what I found in some of these other places. I went first to Grand Rapids, then to Dayton, then to Cincinnati, and the cautionary tale was Youngstown. That was supposed to be the town we don't want to be. And it actually all wound up fitting very neatly. I also went to Ann Arbor just to learn some things about what they do there, but I did not make it one of the cities because it's so different. It's not really comparable. But all these cities are what they call legacy, what the people who study this stuff call legacy cities. Old industrial Rust Belt cities that have lost much of their industry, much of their commerce, most of their Fortune 500 companies, and had to reinvent themselves. The other city that was sort of in the background all the time was Pittsburgh, because it's the prototypical, it's in some ways not comparable either, but it's the prototypical Rust Belt city, legacy city that was really, really down, got hit just like Youngstown did, but has now become this sort of, if you go to Pittsburgh, they think it's Paris. And they all...
It's not my fault.
Armageddon. So here are some of the things I found in those places. Grand Rapids, which people here kind of think of as, it's fantastic. We could never be as nice as Grand Rapids. Grand Rapids, smaller, core city, larger, major metropolitan area. The biggest things I saw there were actually fewer what I would call social and economic assets, cultural assets, but they had three big things: an emphasis on the arts, a major corporation that was deeply involved in the city, and self-confidence. By that I mean three things that we perhaps lack or lack in abundance. Dayton, in some ways most comparable to us. They lost National Cash Register a couple years ago, which would be roughly akin to us losing Jeep completely. Very similar size. Dayton has a very government-friendly policy toward the entrepreneurial class, towards small business people and inventive small business people like yourselves. That's one of the things Dayton has. Secondly, it has a Chamber of Commerce that's deeply involved in the politics, business, and culture of the city. And thirdly, it has a university, albeit private university, that has pulled itself up from sort of okay, mediocre to major research university. So they're pulling in major research dollars. And to give you an idea, the mayor of Dayton told me the most important person to economic development in this town is the president of the university. Then Youngstown. That was the cautionary tale. I'll double back to it in a minute. And finally, Cincinnati, which has, of course, much deeper corporate pockets and many more large corporate citizens, but has very successfully rehabbed the older parts of its city and has major universities and, again, sort of the self-confidence of a major city. Now, one thing that Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, Dayton all have in common is a city manager system. I know that this city made a collective decision some years ago to reject the city manager system and go with the strong mayor system. But I started to think after a while it was very clear that these cities that were doing well had some kind of management system in city government and some kind of permanent or ongoing management class. People who were really running the store as the political actors came and went and who provided the city with stability. For example, that group of people manages this very business-friendly attitude in Dayton. So in Cincinnati, they have a city manager, but it's a kind of a hybrid system. The city manager and the mayor sort of share power. And as I came away from all of these cities, the sort of best practice that seemed glaringly obvious was that all of them had modern management practices, a particular management system they'd adopted, and a group of people who understood taxation, accounting, consolidating services, metrics. That's kind of the big term of art in city management these days. They had people who knew how to run the mechanics of the city. And the cautionary tale of Youngstown was a totally political system where there was no management class and the mayor was under indictment. Nice guy, but under indictment. And that to me was sort of where we don't want to go. And it seems to me where you wind up if you have a completely politicized city government. I just want to throw out touch briefly on the last mayor's race, and then we can just chat. But I want to throw out, based on what I think I found in these cities, a challenge to all of you. I think that you are a political constituency. I think you have potential political power. And I think it's very underutilized and undervalued by all of you. The Mayor Hicks Hudson, won her race by what we all thought was an amazing number. Nobody expected her to win by that much. But keep in mind that she won 35% of the vote, 35% of the vote of the people who came out, 65% of the people who came out did not vote for her. I mean, the traditional Democratic standard, the plurality is 51%. So you're well under 51%. And that is 35% of 26%. 26% of the eligible voters came out on election day. 1/3 of them voted for the group of people who are now going to be running the city. So I guess I think two things. One is that 65% of the people who came out and the 74% of the people who didn't come out really need to get organized. I mean, that in my mind is a constituency, small business, independents, swing voters, and nothing against the Democratic Party or labor unions. I think that labor unions created the middle class in this country. But if you have a city where there is no political competition, it's very unhealthy, and you're really headed toward the Youngstown pole and not the Dayton or Ann Arbor or Grand Rapids pole. And if you don't have a managerial class working in your city that is constant over time, you're going to miss out on grants. You're not going to attract business. You're going to be business unfriendly because the government's so unwieldy. And you're going to be mired in mediocrity ad infinitum. So those are just some thoughts on what I think I found, and I'm just sort of issuing a challenge to all the people in the city who say, the unions run everything, the rest of us don't count. That's not true. That's not necessarily true if you get organized. And I'd like to see some sort of mechanism by which small business, younger people, the entrepreneurial class have a real voice in local politics. And not just kind of an advisory voice, but clout. And I think it's possible. So those are some things, or we can talk about anything else you want to talk about. And let's just chat. The question was, in the other cities, what was voter turnout? It's not hugely higher, but it correlates with some of the other stuff I found. For example, Youngstown's voter turnout is even lower than ours. We ask yourself why that is. Well, they're not getting very good choices. They're not getting very outstanding people. It's 10, depending on the year you pick, 10 to 15 points higher in Grand Rapids, where there's a lot of kind of pride in the city. Also, the mayor was a long-term mayor. It's a nonpartisan electoral system. Ours is supposed to be, but it's not really. But he's a guy who, he's kind of Republican, but moderate and works with everybody. And he had the job for like 12 years. And he worked very closely with the managers. So this was also true in Dayton. They don't have this kind of kill each other attitude in local politics. And our council, for one thing, it's too big, but our council is totally politicized, and every member of council thinks I should be mayor. And some of these towns where they're doing a little better, you have more of a civic sense where the guy is sort of, I'm doing my bit for the community, I'm doing my bit for the town. I don't want to be mayor, I don't want to be in politics, I'm doing my bit for the town. And if you go back in Toledo history, we used to get people like that, not these, now this will sound too derogatory, but these sort of wannabe small-time politicians. I want to be governor someday, I want to be a state senator, I want to be this, I want to be that. They don't want to be on council. So what I found in those towns was where you had a civic culture that was more cooperative, more grown up, if you will, more pragmatic, and the people had some confidence in their leadership, of course you got better turnout. The question was, what are Toledo's strengths and weaknesses in comparison to some of these other cities? I think the strengths are just the sheer number of physical and cultural assets. The river, which is enormously underutilized. Every urban planner who's looked at it says that. And most of these other cities are trying to do aggressive, creative things with their rivers, including Grand Rapids and Dayton. So we have the list everybody knows: the museum, the zoo, Maumee Country Day, a university that when the new president came here, she was stunned that there was a medical school and a law school. So there's enormous unfulfilled potential at the university. And then I'm going to do a series on universities to sort of follow this first series I did. So, and then the ProMedica movement toward becoming a research hospital is really even more significant than coming downtown long term. So you've got all the elements here, and I think the big drawbacks are lack of coordination and lack of confidence. We lack really good leadership. We lack people working together and cooperating together and taking down the silos and merging. There are a couple interesting new things happening in that regard. But we lack leadership, coordination, and self-confidence. And I think if we could conquer the first two we were talking earlier, I think are easier to fix than the last, but I think that's going to be fixed generationally. I think younger people are, all the people who say, oh, it's horrible here and we can't be anything, are dying off. And not to rush them along, but that's the confidence of younger people in this city is a great thing. One small practical thing, and I think Sandy Spang spoke to it in the campaign, there's nobody in the city saying, how do we make people who want to, how do we help people who want to make something happen? How do we help them make it happen? We still have this sort of structure that is oppositional and indifferent. And that's an easy fix. But we haven't fixed it. Yes, sir.
So Keith, this is a group of startups and entrepreneurs. And when you look at an entrepreneur, their goal is to make money. How do we change the attitude in this community that it's okay, that we should embrace wealth creators and not judge people who are making money? Not judge them on the amount of money they make, but more judge on how much they give back for community support afterwards. Because it seems like anyone who makes money in this town gets a big target on their forehead. Not that they're not giving enough back, but you're making too much money. Whether it be the president of a university or the leader of a Fortune 500 company or an entrepreneur. It just seems there's this constant push down and you're making too much money and it's not worth it. Because I would guess that the confidence in this community would rise as we have more and more role models like the DeVosses in Grand Rapids and many of those other families saying it's okay to make a lot of money. We just feel it's our obligation then to give it back.
Did everybody hear the question?
Try to speak loudly.
Yeah. The question, if I can paraphrase it briefly, is how do we change this culture of people who want to create wealth and people who are making money are bad guys, and they should be brought down somehow? Is that a fair summary of the? Boy, it's a great question, and I think it's the $100,000 question. I think you have to link change in culture and in leadership. You have to link the two things. And again, this kind of union town mentality, if that's the only mentality you have, if there's no balance, we really lack balance. If there's nobody saying, hey, wait a minute, Randy Ostra's, this is good what he's doing for downtown Toledo, then I think you're never going to get out of that pit and you're not going to be able to attract new creative people, new business, or hold on to the people who want to do stuff here. I'll give you an example of a guy who told a friend of mine, I'm not voting for Mike Bell. He gave away our land to the Chinese. I just don't want those people here. Well, how about if those people are creating jobs and paying taxes? I mean, give me a break. That is so regressive, and not to mention racist. But that's a huge question, and I think the only way is for people like yourself, people in this room, to speak up and ultimately get some political clout. Because if you're just walking around saying, gee, I wish people in this town saw the other side, I wish they thought differently, I don't think you're going to get there. I think you're just going to be walking around mumbling. So I think you have to do what people do when they have a social and cultural agenda. You have to politicize it and put some political heft behind it. Okay, the question was the role of universities in economic development. Is that a fair restatement? Right. Well, you can't compare it to Ann Arbor because the simplest way to put it is, as the mayor told me, people come to us. We don't have to go to them. And we have an industry here that is never moving out of town. It's never going to get smaller, and it's never moving out of town. So they have other problems of their own, like affordable housing. But I think we're very comparable to Pittsburgh. Think of us as a small Pittsburgh. This is one of the things I'm going to do in the next series is write about this. The University of Pittsburgh, and I can say this because I went there, I have a couple of degrees from there, was kind of a so-so place. And through the, again, leadership of that university, 2 presidents in a row, it became a really great, a major American university, major research center, and a place of some respectability and clout. And the term of art is eds and meds, the driver of modern economies on the macro scale is medicine, medical research, hospitals, universities. So clearly what we got to do is upgrade our medical institutions, which is exactly what, I don't know whether they can pull it off, but ProMedica's committed, it'll come to $1 billion over 50 years into turning the medical school at UT in cooperation with, in association with Toledo Hospital into a research hospital. So that's big news, that's huge. Then I think we have to attract, frankly, some pharmaceutical companies or some health insurance companies. That's one of the things Dayton did. They attracted some health insurance companies. And the other piece is the university, and it's got to be upgraded from a kind of sleepy, very beautiful, pretty place to walk around, but it's got to become a greater university, a better university. When you have people, you have basically open admission, you got people teaching out of their fields, people teaching political science who have master's degrees in sociology or law degrees, and that stuff just doesn't cut it if you want to be in the league of a Pitt or Carnegie Mellon. So, but the good news is the pieces are in place. It's all here. We don't have to try to invent a university. We have a university with a decent law school and a good medical school. So the pieces are in place, and with this development of the medical school working with Toledo Hospital, I mean, that's going to be a whole new campus, many thousands of new jobs, new docs, faculty members. So the pieces are in place, but again, I think we need self-confidence, coordination, and leadership.
Let's do one more question.
Dave's been
Okay. Speaking to the self-confidence issue, I mean, what is something that everybody in this room can go out and do to improve that? And what do you think of messaging and branding, kind of like you will do better in Toledo? Obviously, it needs to be reinforced. What do
Right.
you think about things like that?
I think it's great. I think social media can be really helpful. I think groups like this can be enormously helpful and influential. Again, I think organize politically, form a PAC, and back a candidate, get your friends to vote. I think that's where it is in towns like this. And you know, one of the cities I wrote about, they had an even simpler slogan than you will do better in Toledo. Believe. That's what Baltimore did. And everybody said, ha, ha, ha. But you know, this stuff always gets laughed at in the beginning. Building Mud Hens Stadium, what everybody said it'll never work. It'll never work because we've never done anything like that, and you can't park. And they were utterly wrong. So like the conventional wisdom is always wrong on moving forward. And I'm sure there are people now saying to Osteria, there's no way in the shadow of Cleveland Clinic and University of Michigan Medical School that you're going to create a research hospital. Well, if they build it around the children's hospital, they find some specialties, I mean, it can be done. There's no reason it can't be done. And when you look at how far down Pittsburgh was and what it is today, I mean, that's the example that everybody points to. The big example, Detroit is the other big example, and then the smaller example is Youngstown. That's what you don't want to be. But I think keep doing what you're doing. Just go to the next level in terms of visibility and political power. Thank you.